Growing up, I never really liked comic books. I always gravitated towards real, long, traditional novels. I really, really liked Harry Potter, and I read everything I could get my hands on, everything good. I was very, very particular about what I liked. So, unfortunately, a lot of like really popular stuff among kids was kind of a bit beneath me, I should say. Like it was too simplistic, too basic. I honestly disliked a bunch of stuff I read, but when I did find something I liked a lot, I really, really enjoyed it, and I really, really understood that I loved to read. I loved stories. I loved like writing. I loved experiencing this new stuff. I that that was what I favored, and as a result, I began to feel that comic books were sort of beneath me as well. Like comic books were inferior. Comic books could not compete with real novels. Comic books are lesser. They're not as good. They're not as compelling. They're not as complex. There's not enough going on. They're not as appealing to me. They're not as good. They're not worth my time. They are worthless. People who like them are stupid. It was That was the sort of mindset I was in for a very, very long time. And as an adult, I completely still agree with that. Like, Western comics are complete trash and always have been. They rely too much on brand names and like doing the same thing over and over again and like not really evolving or growing or really pushing the medium forward or really doing anything new or interesting. But it's so interesting how these comics that have had like years of head start, right? Like I grew up watching Spider-Man cartoons, like X-Men cartoons, Justice League, the Batman movies, all of this like Western media telling me that like I should love these heroes, respect them, respect their history, respect their brand, and buy their comic books. But in the end, I gravitated towards manga. I gravitated towards One Piece. I gravitated towards Berserk, like Uzumaki. I'm reading all this like really really good creative stuff, right? Stuff that's like completely different, completely distinct, has its own unique style and flair, and like above all else doesn't feel repetitive or samey, right? Like it's kind of incredible how something like Dragon Ball can be so radically different than One Piece, even though One Piece was influenced by Dragon Ball. Like the creator himself like said that. But like even if they have some things in common, they're still radically different brands. They're still radically different series with their own creators, their own pacing, their own strengths and weaknesses, and their own appeal. And that's something I feel is missing from Western comics, is that they don't have as wide of a breadth of appeal. Like they don't appeal to enough of different audiences. Like when you get right down to it, and I really do think this is true, if you're not interested in the history of comic books and like continuity and how things have developed and like how ridiculous things are, if you're not fascinated by that sort of thing, you do not like comic books. You cannot get into them. It is simply impossible because you have to deal with like all this crazy shit, like even simple stuff like why Spider-Man isn't married to Mary Jane anymore. Like I remember like being told that when it happened in 2008 by that kid. This kid, I should make a video about that kid actually. Holy crap. He's my kid, that kid, the kid who always made stuff up. That kid. That kid, man, I hope I can remember good stories. But like he did this all the time where he would make up all this crazy ass bullshit and try to get you to believe him. And yeah, this kid was the one who told me that Spider-Man wasn't married to Mary Jane anymore. And like I didn't believe him. Like I asked him if they had gotten a divorce. This was in like 2008. So and he said like no, it was he couldn't even really explain it to me, because it's so convoluted and so complicated and honestly so retarded. Like you can't even really grasp it. You cannot grasp the true form of like the stupidity of Marvel Comics. Like you have to be invested in it. You have to spend like all of your free time studying up on this shit instead of just picking up a comic book and reading it. Like I was able to go into Uzumaki knowing absolutely nothing about it, right? Like knowing nothing about Junji Ito, nothing about like the story other than like some vague bullshit about spirals, and I was completely blown away. I was impressed by the art. I was impressed by like the ideas presented. I was like the characters won me over. Like the ideas, the sort of events. And sure, I have problems with Ito's work, especially now that I've read some more stuff he's done. But I think that like Uzumaki was probably the best thing I've read last year. To be completely bluntly honest with you, like I've been thinking about it since I finished it, and I love it. Like, and it's a manga, a comic book, something I never thought I would like as much as I do, and it's a manga, not a comic book. It's a manga, something I honestly did not think I would like as much as I did. And I think there's a lot of things to take away from this. Like, of course, like how my taste changed as I get older, and how some things stay the same. How I was kind of like had this kind of misconception around manga, but around comics or the nature of comic books, but how it was kind of founded as well. Because comics, all throughout my youth, did nothing to impress me. Like, seeing people, like, seriously defend, like, Alan Moore as, like, some genius. See, the guy who wrote Lost Girls, a genius. Yeah, sure, whatever. Seeing people, like, praise, like, lay all this praise among certain properties and, like, things, and it just, like, there was nothing there that really made me invested in the brand, or made me want to like ever pick up a comic, because like when you get right down to it, comics are so poorly drawn, so poorly written. There's no reason to pick up a comic over watching a cartoon, like watching a cartoon adaptation. Even the live action movies, I don't really feel really capture the appeal that I got from watching the cartoons. Like, even today, I kind of want to go back and watch old Marvel cartoons, not the terrible not the terrible live action movies. I do think that manga has far eclipses Western comics, or at least American comics, in every single conceivable metric. Right, the art is better, the storylines are better, the characters are better, the action is better, the variety is better. I can't get over this. Like, again, like, what have I been reading? Like Berserk and Uzumaki, right? Two, again, darkish, sort of like supernatural theme, but they're very radically different from one another. Like, when you get right down to it, what's the difference between Superman and Batman? Like, really? Like, next to nothing, right? Like, people will, like, argue that, like, oh, they have completely different moralities. But when you get right down to it, they're doing the same exact thing. They're growing up against the same kind of enemies, and they team up together in the end. Like, that's the reality of DC Comics. That's the reality of Marvel, is that, like, it's all the same thing. Like, it's all corporate, it's all uninspired, like, it's not very creative, it's not very interesting. Manga stands heads and shoulders above Western comics, for sure. And I don't think there's any better way to emphasize this than just the best superhero fiction I've seen in the past couple of years has been One Punch Man and My Hero Academia, both of which put everything the Western comics industry has been putting out to shame. One Punch Man is so much more fun than anything these other people have come out with, and I don't think that's going to change anytime soon.